Good morning, happy World Lupus Day. I don't think we said that, did we?
No, it's tomorrow.
Is it
We will
tomorrow?
finish
So
off
this
the day, yeah.
weekend, we'll finish off the day with saying happy World Lupus Day.
Thanks.
I'm really pleased to join you. I wanna reiterate that I'm a retired occupational therapist, just so that nobody from my licensing board says that I'm giving you advice as a practicing occupational therapist. But it also means that I'm getting out of practice from giving these talks. And kind of forgetting some of the things that I used to do because my habits have been changing. But I'm going to talk about balancing life activities in the presence of lupus and arthritis. Deanne already gave a land acknowledgement earlier this morning, but it's just a small step that we take towards realizing some of the calls to action in the report from the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation. So I think it is important that we think about when we gather together what this actually means and what steps we're taking towards overcoming the ill effects of colonization and reducing inequities. So the purpose of my talk this morning is to share ways to engage in occupations of daily life while managing disease symptoms, identify some self-care strategies to support living well with lupus, and share or draw upon some of the science that's behind the advice for some of these lifestyle interventions and self-management interventions that health professionals and people with lived experience of lupus and arthritis share with us. So take a minute. I'll time the minute so that we don't go on too long, but jot down as many ideas as you can for activities that give you joy, help you relax, help you recover. You do them just for fun. So I'll be quiet for a minute, but jot down as many ideas as you have for activities you do for joy, relaxation, recovery, or fun. That's too much time for some people. What is that? Well, what does that tell you? 1 minute's too much time for jotting down things you do for joy. Okay, so, and then just look at your list and notice how many of those things you can pick up for 15 or 20 minutes at a time. How many require 2 or 3 hours of time? How many are a day trip? Take half a day or longer. Hold those ideas back of mind, and we're going to come back to those at the end of the talk. But research has shown over many years has shown that people living with multiple chronic diseases, so not just lupus or arthritis, but other types of chronic illnesses or autoimmune disorders, but also people who have multiple chronic diseases. They're concerned about ways to do the tasks that they need and want to do in everyday life, and the effect that their illness or condition has had on the things that they need to do. They also seek continuity with their former lives or their pre-diagnosis lives because they've developed an identity and interest in things, done training or education to be certain things, and they want some continuity for the rest of their life because they've had this life plan in front of them. So they want to connect with the pre-diagnosis lives. And going forward, when they think about their lives with a disease that's not going to go away but can be managed, they're really concerned with social roles that they value, being a worker, being a parent, being a golfer, like what are the things that you like to do in the different aspects of your lives in terms of leisure, work, or productivity, going to school and those sorts of things, participating in the day-to-day activities across the lifespan. And these areas is what I had focused my research on. And so my perspective for the purposes of this talk is moderation in all things. We look at, we can't do everything all the time, but we can probably do everything some of the time if it's really important to us. And in the research world, this is a concept called occupational balance. So what do we mean by moderation in all things? Well, we all have things that we need and want to do. And we living well with lupus or other chronic conditions comes with many recommendations for taking your medicine, following a good diet, make sure you have regular exercise or physical activity, and lots of other suggestions for living well. But who decides what moderation looks like? And do we really mean all things? So my research drew on qualitative and narrative evidence, or more simply, stories that people tell, to think about the context of daily life. People need and to do what's most important and meaningful to them, and things that are expected of them by the world around them. And they do these things across an entire lifespan, not just one moment in time. And throughout that lifespan, our resources, our supports, our demands, our health, our abilities are constantly changing. So we can't come up with a recipe that says, okay, if we do this, everything's going to be okay, because everything's always cyclical and changing, and is uncertain and unreliable over the course of our lifespan. They're constantly changing. So from the perspective of occupational therapy and looking at occupational balance, we call all these things that occupy our time in a day occupations. So what do we do when we think about choosing or changing or adapting occupations in order to live our best life? And that requires an awareness of lots of different things that we're able or more or less able to do. So occupational balance is defined as the subjective experience of having the right amount of activities and right variation among activities, such as paid and unpaid work, leisure, rest, and sleep. So that might include volunteering, household work, creative pursuits, physical activity, obligatory things because your partner, your parent, your children have certain expectations of you, more discretionary things, all those things that you do for joy and fun that are up to you to choose. This idea of balance among work, leisure, rest, and sleep has been embedded in occupational therapy since the formal beginnings of the profession, and then evolved into varying philosophies on wellness and self-care and theories that were based on research and clinical observations. And so a number of people have looked at how do you measure occupational balance? How do you facilitate occupational balance? How do we help people live well? Well, who decides what's right? So what is this right balance? Well, you get to decide what's right. You have total autonomy in that. You might not feel like you have total autonomy in it some of the time because people place demands on you, but you decide what's right. There's no one goal that we're trying to achieve. It's not like physical activity where the recommendation is a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every week or on most days of the week. We don't have an outcome like that says if you do this much of different activities, you'll be healthier. But you get to decide what's right for you, and it will change across your lifetime. And you want a pattern of life activities that's comprised of the right amount and right variation. And so when you're trying to think about that, you want to consider the kinds of activities, whether they're work or obligatory, play or restorative, and the characteristics of those activities or occupations. Are they social? Are they active? Are they challenging? So like, are you learning? Are you moving? Are you having fun with other people? Not just the time that's spent. So a lot of people look at occupational balance, think it sounds like work-life balance, where there's a lot of work about how much time you spend in different things. Time's important, but it's only one piece of the equation. So in research shows that the potential impact of many types of lupus and arthritis is occupational disruption or activity disruption. The symptoms of the disease gets in the way of doing these different life activities or occupations. And in one of our studies of women who were living with early rheumatoid arthritis, the main ideas that were coming out of that in terms of disruptions were all the uncertainties because their symptoms went up and down. They had exacerbations and remissions. Their activities were then disrupted. So they're trying to figure things out. So here's where we're learning how to do things differently. So all these different parenting tasks we have, or the different work tasks that we have, can Can we have a more flexible schedule? Can we have more control over what we do when? So you start doing things differently, and all of this coming together changes views of self. So you might have viewed yourself as very competent at something, and the arthritis got in the way of doing it. So you had to figure out a different way of doing it, so you were less certain. So it was kind of teasing out these different things. So these are just a couple of examples or things that people said to us in this research. I have to find other things I like to replace things that are fulfilling. To me, I'm very often excluded by the mere fact that I can no more lift a bowling ball than I can fly to the moon. So they were leaving one leisure activity and trying to find another one that they could substitute for it that was going to be equally satisfying or have other challenges and opportunities in it. Or you have to face the fact you're not going to go back to that job, period. A year and a half later, I'm still going, how do I define myself? And that's been really hard. So you're a lot more than your job description, but there's a huge part of you that is the job. So there's some transitions or challenges that people might have in thinking about how they work or are employed and what kinds of jobs it is that they can do. In a more recent study of women's experiences on living with lupus, there were a lot of the same types of ideas. And the overarching theme from this research was the women described, or the researchers interpreted what the women described as moving with the waves of SLE, spelling out lupus in full, but a sea of ever-changing and predictable movement, but back and forth through life. So they kind of viewed it as these waves. And so a couple of examples there is that lupus is there all the time. So I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to find the loophole so that I can continue to do the things I want to do. Or I had to find other values that made me happy. Painting is something that's pointing forward in life and it's not pulling me back. So there was a lot of discussion of this kind of to and fro or back and forth, but people could figure it out. So their lives were enriched through relationships and new activities. They were figuring out both not just the limitations, but also the possibilities within their bodies to pursue the things that they wanted to do. And not to leave men out. Men are very hard to study in these types of areas because they never volunteer for these kinds of studies. Because it means talking. I shouldn't say never. They rarely volunteer for these types of studies because they don't want to have that long of a conversation. You look at the average length of interviews and studies with men and it's like 15 or 20 minutes and the women talk for an hour and a half. So we have much more descriptive studies from women, but these are some men who have inflammatory types of arthritis, talking about the effect of that arthritis on disrupting their activities. They want to do it. The mind is willing and wanting to do it, but the body's not allowing me to do it. And so trying to figure out how to reconcile changes in body strength and flexibility, for example. Sometimes the wife had to put me socks on. This was a Scottish man, so that's why it's not really poor grammar. It sounds really cute and Scottish. Like I said, I wouldn't wish it on nobody. Or as a cricket captain, you have to be able to play cricket, don't you? And I had to give that up. So there are very real impacts of the illness, but it's not insurmountable. So it's this kind of, how do we deal with all of these different uncertainties or changes? And so the ways that we deal with it is choosing what matters. So you have to be really clear and reflective on what matters and what's important, and then plan ahead. And so people in these studies talk about good days, bad days, and worse days. And experiencing these fluctuations in good days, bad days, and worse days does create some strain on the body, and it taxes the immune system over time, accommodating to all of that. Fatigue can be overwhelming, and people can't always implement all these great strategies or tips that their health providers or peers have offered to them. They work on good days, but when you're having a worse day, you're just like, you're so depleted. You don't have the capacity to sometimes employ some of those tips. And we need to remember that everyone carries a different load. We need to understand that the individual context to help people set realistic plans and reduce distress and improve balance in terms of what can be accomplished in a day or a week. And it is possible to minimize stress or distress and engage in what matters to you, but you need to first start with what matters to me. So you need to be clear on what that is. And there is a case for planning and routines, because if you establish routine that really supports the things that matter and the things that you want to do, then chances are you can sustain that over time, notwithstanding that there will be some ups and downs. If you look in 24 hours though, and if you're employed or you're a parent, you might have a really huge chunk of the day that needs to go to that part of your life. You absolutely have to have a huge chunk of your day that goes to sleep. And then you're trying to fit everything else in to this remaining quarter or third of a day. And you want to, and that's the part that we play around with. And are we finding a balance of the right amount of activities, what's most important to me, and the right balance across different activities, and they have different characteristics. And so there's a sample little to-do list there. You know, I can wake up, I gotta make the coffee, I need to stretch and move my body, I need to drink water, I need to support my relationship, so I need to tell someone I love them. Hopefully they tell me the same thing. I need good nutrition, I need to make good meals, I need to do work I really like, because who's gonna, like, why live with a chronic illness and work we don't like? So we need to do things that we like. We need to remember to have some fun. We need to remember that every day we've done the absolute best that we can and be proud of what it was that we did or didn't do, because sometimes we need to say, I can't do that today. This is a shout out for an occupational therapist named Cheryl Crow. She's just across the border in Washington State, and she talks about 4 life pillars. And her website helps people choose different activities and plays with these pie charts to show how the balance is different for everyone. And she says that the pillars of, she has rheumatoid arthritis herself, as well as being an occupational therapist. But how am I going to manage my stress? How am I going to support sleep and rest? How am I going to move and have good nutrition so that I'm kind of supporting my body? And so how do I manage those lifestyle pillars? Because then I can make my lifestyle choices and sustain them over time. And everybody's will be a little bit different. So it's kind of a shout out to her. I'm going to take a minute or two just to talk about sleep, because it really is a cornerstone to preventing worse days. So lack of sleep, poor quality sleep, or too little sleep increases inflammation. We already have inflammation if you have an autoimmune disorder, so we don't want to do things that increase it. We want to do things that flatten it. Sufficient good quality sleep helps our tissues repair and heal. It supports brain health, especially in kids and developing kids. Motor and cognitive performance suffer with less than about 8 hours sleep per night or per day, because it's okay to have a siesta habit. So if you're a 6-hour a night sleeper and you have a 45-minute nap, that you kind of get to that 7 to 8 hours sleep, that's okay too. And sleep really does counter the effects of stress. So these are some of the kind of routine tips for a good quality sleep, to really take some time to think about where you sleep, and so having an environment that will really support sleep. What are the routines that you engage in right before bedtime, but also what are you doing during the day that might affect the quality of your sleep at night? So you want a cool, dark room, so less than the traditional room temperature, so 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 17 or 18 degrees Celsius. If you've got other people in the same house, everybody's going to have a little bit different tolerance, and that's what blankets are for. So you go for the cool room, and the people who are a little bit cooler have a warmer blanket. There's actually been a few studies showing the Scandinavian method to couples sleeping okay. They have their own blankets. So like they don't have a queen size or a king size blanket that they share and one person's pulling it off. Or pulling it to their side or whatever. They put 2 single blankets on the big bed, and that way people have what they want. You need a pillow that supports the head and neck, because it's surprising how much the sleep quality will decrease if your head, the weight of your head is not adequately supported. So that's going to be different for everyone, but people can help you find a good pillow, and the best bed linens you can afford, because if you're comfortable in bed and that's where your little bit of luxury is. You sleep better, then kind of everything stems from that. You do want to slow down and relax before, an hour or so before bedtime. There's been lots of people talk about no screen time in the hour before bed. So read a book on paper, do a little bit of meditation or listen to music, do things that don't keep your brain alert. Sometimes having a hot bath, if you've been having difficulty sleeping, helps because it relaxes both mind and muscles. It dilates your capillaries, so that's going to cool your body when you come out of the tub, and it is associated with falling asleep faster. So if one of the issues is falling asleep, then doing things like this may help. And you will sleep better if you have some physical activity every day. So you need to think about the daytime routines and adequate nutrition and some joyful, creative, mindful activities, those things that you jotted down at the beginning. If you have a few minutes for doing those, your body is more likely to be ready for sleep when sleep comes. So what we're seeking for is kind of optimal balance, because that's health enhancing. It supports harmony and thriving and happier people, rather than an imbalance, which results in an increased risk to health. You're more likely to be susceptible to illness because you're not dealing with stress or conflict, or you might simply be bored, and that's not fun either. So we're trying to slide up that scale. So what are some things that can do today? Well, there's no single right pattern of activity, so we can't give a prescription per se for what to do, other than to say to coach through, like, what are the things that are meaningful, that matter, that are important, and am I doing them, and do I need support for doing them? Am I really paying attention to some of my own learning needs or creative needs or joyful needs? So and how much, having a really flexible mindset about it, how much is enough? How much would I like? Where are we on the teeter-totter in terms of finding the right pattern of activities that'll work for us? Want to cultivate occupations that support rest and creativity in minutes versus hours, so that you can sprinkle them throughout the day. Same thing with physical activity, minutes versus hours. Really hard to find an hour to go do something in a really busy day, or when there's multiple demands on your time. Much easier to find 10 minutes. So if you can pick up a hobby or an activity for a few minutes rather than a whole day. We can't fit a day skiing in on a regular basis. We can do it once in a while. So that's one hobby, but where's the one that you can pick up for 10 minutes? So maybe it's a few yoga stretches, maybe it's picking up knitting, or so what are some activities that allow us to relax and experience some fun a few minutes a day? So you find some things to give you joy, challenge you to learn, restore your spirit, make you strong. So those are physical ones and that matter to you. So this is the takeaway message that from an old 1989 essay that Robert Fulghum wrote, and he had all I really need to know I learned in kindergarten. And so it said, like, you could have stopped your formal education sooner than you thought. These are just 3 keepers from that list. And it does in fact have some important ways, things that we learned in kindergarten for the rest of our life. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some, and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. And when you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together. Okay, so that is the takeaway. Any questions?
Just before you run up the sleep lines, I
Yes.
was about to say, what about sleep? Because,
Yeah.
and it was interesting, the different people who contributed their sleep quadrants, like some people needed more sleep, some was like a quarter of the day or whatever.
Yeah.
Because for me, I find I really need sleep, even though I don't necessarily do a lot every day, but I find. Yeah, so I don't know, what I was wanting to know is with a condition like this, sleep, you need sleep.
Yes.
Is the takeaway, right?
Yeah. Well, the takeaway is everybody needs sleep, even if they don't have a health condition, or they don't have a medical diagnosis of some kind. But if you have an autoimmune disease and you have inflammation, your tissues need time to repair. And it's systemic, it's affecting your brain, it's affecting your muscles, your bones, your growth, and your cognitive powers and such. So you need that restorative period of time. So you need about 8 hours of sleep in every 24-hour period. You need at least 6. And you might need as much as 9 or 10. So it will be different for different people, but it's kind of in that ballpark of 8 hours. And you want to get a restorative sleep at night, but you may need a little bit of sleep during the day. So that's the take a nap piece where you only want kind of less than an hour, 20 to 30 minutes of a nap. You don't, because if you nap for very much during the day, you're going to disturb your nighttime sleep. And you want the important one is that restorative nighttime sleep.
I was gonna say the thing that is difficult is to reconcile the fact that if you don't feel or see symptoms during the day.
Yeah.
Justifying the amount of sleep you need at night, because I don't necessarily feel anything is unusual, but I definitely need the sleep at night.
Yes, you do need this, yeah, so you need the sleep at night, and so people will need different amounts, but it's not just the time, it's the quality of the sleep. So lots of us have experiences of waking up in the middle of the night, and actually through the lifespan, the older you are, the more you have to get up and pee during the night. And so the real secret is, can I get up and pee without actually waking up? Because if you wake up too much, you can't go back to sleep, right? And you don't want to trip and fall when you get up to pee, and you don't want the cats to think you're going to let them out. So like there are things that will disrupt. So the quality, you might have stayed in the bed for 9 hours, but you didn't get as good a quality of sleep. And your body tells you that the next day. So like you'll be dragging a little bit, or you won't have the same amount of energy, or you might have a little bit of aches and pains in the morning. And that's where, if you've had poor quality sleep, that's where a nap at a strategic point during the day might restore you a little bit so you can finish the day, because you want to go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time. And if you're having problems sleeping, then really focus on getting up at the same time every day, because eventually your body will tire itself out and go to sleep at the same time every day.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So with this chronic inflammation the body has, so you're saying that we need the sleep to recuperate. And would it take longer for the body to recuperate if you're working out, say, like lifting weights and that sort of thing? Does the body need more time if it's taxed by the inflammation?
Well, the sleep doesn't cure inflammation. It supports minimizing inflammation, and your body needs recovery time every day to repair tissues. And so if you were working out during the day, that's a good thing for your body. I would say you only need more recovery time if you exceeded your capacity, and so you had a muscle injury, or so like you had an accident or you lifted beyond your capacity and you tore some, had some or you went too long, too hard, too fast, too far. And so you had some little micro tears in your muscle. So you're feeling it for 3 or 4 or 5 days afterwards. That's too much. But sleep does support the repair process of the tissues in your body.
And is there anything that would assist in the repair, like say magnesium bisglycinate or something like that?
So I would say that some of those supplements, the jury's kind of still out on it, but there's a little bit of evidence that some supplements support tissue repair, but it's something that you should chat about with your doctor, because you can have deficiencies in some vitamins and minerals because of other things that are going on, because of whatever your diagnosis is, but also the medications you're on. So sometimes a supplement like magnesium is necessary for someone, but most supplements for people who don't have a deficiency just result in really expensive pee. You've spent all this money on the supplements and they just go through your body when you don't need them. But there is a role for some of them for some people.
Thank you.
At the back, and then I'll come up. This is all just in the context of newer diagnosis of the last few years, and cutaneous right now, hopefully it could be systemic, but there's been a lot of sort of, maybe not conflicting information, but we like to go outside. We hear a lot of things about sun exposure being a problem.
Right.
And there does seem to be some correlation there, seems to be a correlation with like stress. But just wondering, is that like across the board, yes, sun exposure harmful for cutaneous lupus or systemic lupus in general, or?
Well, excessive sun exposure can be harmful to everybody because we do want to filter out UV rays. So everybody should use sunscreen or protective clothing when they go out in the sun for any time at all. Photosensitivity is associated with many forms of lupus. So if your physician has told you that the type of lupus that you have and that it's across the board, yeah.
Across the board, everyone has immune cells in their skin which can be activated by ultraviolet light.
Yeah.
So if you are, and not everyone is going to be the same amount of susceptibility, but especially if you have cutaneous disease, that is on the little bar of that pretty box is UV light protection. So it is not the heat, and I tell everybody, because they're like, I really want to go to Hawaii.
Yeah, it's the UV.
Like, absolutely, go to Hawaii. You just need to actually spend money on UV protection clothing and sunscreen.
Is there a difference between UVA and UVB? Or one's worse than other, or one doesn't matter?
Yes, but I think most of, you can rely on the sunscreen people and
Yeah.
you be sure.
Yeah, you kind of want the full.
I don't know if it's
Across
a
the board.
it's like
Yeah.
a UVA worse for lupus than UVB kind of thing.
In terms of lupus, no, I think that the studies were done with pretty broad spectrum.
Gotcha, yeah, it's probably pretty hard.
And what people often forget is windows. If the UV light goes through windows, doesn't block it, so it's not just when you're outside in the sun, the minute when you're in an environment where there's a lot of sun and it's bright, it doesn't matter where you are, it's not just when you're outside.
Well, like,
And bees.
is that,
Yeah.
is that like
Contact
how much would a window block out? I know you'll get sunburns through windows very easily.
If you've got a filter on the window, it can block a little bit, but in general, I just tell everybody,
Just on
sunscreen on every morning. And just, you get it with cloud exposure, it doesn't have to, and I do think you need to be outside, so don't stop going outside.
Yeah.
Just wear sunscreen. If you're really close to a UV, compact fluorescent, you can get some UV exposure from that, so when you're at work, don't have a compact fluorescent light that's really
Right over
close to you. Based on physics, it really matters how high it is. So these are fine because there's enough distance between them that we're not getting enough exposure, like a lamp or a workspace that's small. Try not to use.
Okay, and then just to add on to that, are there any like sunscreens that are better, or can we just add like zinc oxide to some lotions? Is that okay, or
Whatever you're gonna use.
anything is fine?
Well, not better than
15,
that.
it's okay.
But find one that quality one, because if you're not, you want a good quality one and find one that you like, so everybody's skin's gonna be a little bit different in terms of what it absorbs or.
So there's
you
no
feel
like
sticky.
one's way better than the rest, or one you
No,
don't use at all? kind of
No,
thing?
you wanna try a
I'm sure
couple
you
of
check the
different ones.
quantity will tell you.
And you, yeah, and you do, a little bit higher SPF factor on it, like don't do the ones that say they are. Well, or be less reliant if you're gonna go out in the sun on ones that are very low SPF factor on it, like. You want one that says 30, SPF 30 or better.
Sorry, to tag on to this, it's the last little piece of it. We like to do a lot of swimming, and so I'm wondering about chlorinated pools versus ocean water, any evidence that either of those are not good?
I don't know any,
No?
no, yeah,
No, but reapply your sunscreen.
yeah, yeah, you are washing it off and the reflection of the water is, harmful. As
The water
well.
itself. is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
good.
so, yeah, so.
But it does concentrate the UV light.
Yeah, and so when you are when you are swimming, you might want to be wearing a long sleeve surf shirt type of thing and plus put the sunscreen on your face, because you kind of can't cover your face in the ocean or whatever, but that can be in addition to using the sunscreen on your skin can be helpful.
Thank you.
And it was a question here, you might not remember it anymore.
No, not everything very interesting. Just back to sleep.
Mhm.
Now, I wake up often in the night to make the trip. Of course, now I'm wide awake, but I do know that I crash in the afternoon, so I just tell everybody to take me a nap, and off I go. But I'm wondering if you don't feel like don't want a nap. I don't know if meditation would help.
Well, meditation and napping are pretty similar in the studies that look at brainwaves and so forth. It's kind of, because you don't want to go, you're not going into a deep REM sleep in a nap. So napping and doing something that's like mindful meditation, or if you're familiar in yoga, corpse pose, so just lying flat on your back with your heels at the corner of your mat and your arms palms up. But close your eyes and a few nice deep breaths, but just stopping all the thoughts that are coming into your mind, but just spending a few minutes in a reclined pose, supported. And so it's not necessarily a nap, but you take 15 minutes of just straight relaxation. So the full weight of your body supported by the surface that you're on. And it's also a nice thing now that we're coming into nicer weather to do that outdoors somewhere. So, yeah. Not in the sun, yeah. Well, in the shade, have your sunscreen on, but in the shade, but you know, and I actually, most of us would choose to do it in the shade anyways. But looking up through the leaves of a tree or something, like it does kind of calm yourself. So, you know, there are other things besides a nap that you can do to rejuvenate a little bit, and sometimes just taking calm, sometimes singing a song, listening to a bit of music. So again, you're not actually taking a nap, but you're taking a break away from all the busyness that's swirling around you. Well, thank you very much.